viewers. I'm your host Kshitish Naik, and I welcome you all to our podcast conducted by the Free Legal Aid Club of MIT WPU School of Law. And today, the theme of this discussion is health and hygiene of women, which is more than often an ignored topic. But to shed light on this theme, we have with us Miss Khushi Divedi. Good afternoon, Khushi.
Good afternoon, Kshitij.
Okay, so before we begin, Khushi, I would like to set the stage for the entire discussion and how we felicitate the entire podcast. So, in the beginning, I would like to ask that when we talk about women's health and hygiene, many people think only about menstruation and basic sanitation, right? But the real challenges are very big, from lack of safe toilets to stigmas around reproductive health to even silence around cancer and mental health. To begin with, from your experience and from your research, what are the most ignored health challenges women face in daily life, both in urban and in rural India?
That's a great question, Kshitij. I would like to start by saying that we have now started talking about periods way more openly than we used to do before, right? But there are yet still many common and dangerous acts still happening, like women holding their bladder for too long because there are no safe toilets, or rather clean toilets in their area, be it workspace, be it schools, be it their commute routes, and because of that, a study shows that about 50% of public toilets are inaccessible to women. Now, although the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, they have constructed 110 million toilets, but then if 50% of them are inaccessible, I think it does not provide the use the government planned it to make, right? And because of this, women restrict their water intake, which I feel has started to become a medical time bomb, because it then results in UTIs, severe dehydration, kidney problems, and it's not right to ignore these problems. And about 60% of women don't even talk about these problems. And I think that, except periods, I think this is a major concern.
Okay. So, thank you, Kushi. You have like set the stage and you have set the grounds for the discussion. And this actually brings me to my next question, that is about menstrual health. Despite India progressing in many fields, menstruation is still treated as something to hide. Girls are isolated, myths are imposed, and even basic sanitary products are inaccessible to many of them, right? So, why do these taboos still persist? And how can law, like the Right to Education, the ITE Act for that matter, Article 21, Right to Life and Personal Liberty, or government schemes be used to ensure menstrual dignity for all women?
See, I feel that although we have started to talk about periods a lot, but there are still areas where it's not educated about, right? So a study shows that 15 to from the age of 15 to 24%, only 64% of women use right products for menstruation, because other women still feel that it's something to be ashamed of, right? And they don't talk about periods as commonly as they do. They're even very big in rural areas because of economic conditions. Menstrual cups, like pads and things, are not accessible to women that easily. Although ASHA workers are trying to provide it at lower cost, or even sometimes distribute it at free cost, but I feel that ASHA workers have still managed to supply the product, but they have not taught the people how to dispose the product well, right? And about 71% of adolescent girls are too embarrassed to talk about having periods to a guided soul, for example, a doctor, for example, their parents, and they feel that it's a taboo because previously it was treated as it's a taboo, right? Like we weren't allowed in temples, we aren't allowed to go in the kitchen of our own house, we're not allowed to sit with our own family members because it's still considered it as, like, periods are still considered to be impure, right? So I think ASHA workers are doing a great job spreading awareness, but I think we should be little crisp about what we do and change our methods a little more.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. We can see the on-ground improvements by ASHA worker and even by the government. And as we are speaking about the on-ground situation, that brings me to the menstrual infrastructure part of things. In colleges, schools, and even in workplaces. So a large number of girls still drop out of school due to lack of clean toilets or menstrual facilities. Right. Workplaces, especially the informal sector for that matter, also fails to provide hygienic washrooms. Legally, institutions are required to ensure safe sanitation under, let's say, the RTE Act, the Factories Act, and the state guidelines. How far? I mean, it is my question to you that how far are we from fulfilling these obligations, and what systematic changes are needed to actually bring them into reality?
Right. So all the laws made by the government, the RT Act, and everything looks good on paper, but we still have to cover a huge gap because about 36% of schools in rural areas don't have proper accessible toilets, and because of that, it's almost that's the main reason why female girls are dropping out, right? Because of the inaccessibility of the toilets, because they feel too embarrassed that what if they leak, like they'll be judged and they'll be shamed, they'll be bullied for that, right? And 1 in 5 girls misses going to school because of her periods, which again, according, like, in a way it does violate article 21, which is right to education, right? Because she is not able to go to school because of health matters. That is also something that a society can control,
Correct,
right?
correct, correct.
And I feel that the Factories Act and acts like these have made it better, but yet we should we should have penalties for the institution who are not doing a great job. They're constructing the toilets, but we need to maintain the
Maintain
toilets
them
as
as
well,
well. Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Like there should be running water, soap, disposable bins. The toilet needs to be used also, right?
Usable, yeah. Correct,
Exactly.
correct.
So I think we if we start penalizing institution or workplace for not having adequate, we're not saying hi-fi, just basic amenities. I think that would serve as a great
Solution to all this.
solution to
Yeah,
everything.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, as we were discussing about the infrastructural aspect of it, let me bring this point to the sanitation schemes of our country, right? So, schemes like the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan you earlier mentioned, and even the menstrual hygiene scheme and National Health Mission, they claim to improve women's sanitation. But in your observation or in your research, how effective have these schemes truly been, and where do you see gaps in implementation, especially for the marginalized communities?
Okay. So, by the Niti Aayog of 2023, it says that about 40% of rural toilets are not being used because there's not enough water, there's not enough dustbins, there's not enough, for that matter, the doors of the doors also, there are no doors at the toilets, so it's not private enough for a lady to go there, right? So I think that's a problem. The MHS, the menstrual hygiene scheme, it reaches only about 25% of the people, right? And I feel, as I mentioned before, that building toilets are not enough. We need to start maintaining them, right? And I think providing in rural areas, especially providing sanitary napkins and tampons at free of cost and spreading awareness about how to use them is something that can change.
Correct, correct.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, Khushi, I would like to jump to the other parallel of this entire discussion. That is about reproductive health and the access to gynecological care, right? So many women, they hesitate to seek gynecological care due to stigma, the distance, for that matter, or lack of female doctors, the cost, and all other things. Legally, the government is bound under Article 21, then under the National Health Mission and the public health policies to provide accessible reproductive health care. right? So, what structural and cultural barriers prevent women from exercising these rights?
Okay. So first of all, I would like to say is that because women fear of being judged, they are not going through the gynecologist. Like in rural areas, the hospitals are too far from the village. Like even public hospitals. And one more reason I feel is that is bothering all of this situation is that there are not enough female practitioners. There are only male practitioners. I mean, there are only about 17% of gynecologists who are female, and about one doctor serves around 11,000 people.
That is a huge number.
That's a huge number, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And now if we see that women, we barely see women's health as a concern, because women are so at least in rural areas, women are so looked down upon, and their problems and issues are so easily dismissed by their own family members that women feel that maybe I am overthinking about it and it's not that big of a deal. And we often ignore the symptoms our body is trying to give us, right? And one more thing I would like to add is that because I feel that there are many male practitioners, I feel women are not comfortable about sharing their stories or sharing their problem with them because they feel that they'll be judged. But under Article 21, we have the right to women have the right because they have the right of
Confidentiality, right to confidentiality. Yeah.
yeah, that we need to educate and spread awareness to the women that you are protected under this right and nobody is going to misuse the information you provide them. They're just here to guide you. I think spreading awareness is a big role. Yeah.
And as we are just, I mean, we are discussing about these things. That also brings me to my next question, is about, I mean, something that is more, I believe that is of more importance in today's world. It is about STIs and the sexual healthcare awareness, right? So talking about STIs and or sexual health is still a taboo, right? But ignoring symptoms lead to long-term health damages. Women also fear judgment from doctors or hospitals. So, how can we, I mean, as law students, or for that matter, anyone who is listening to this podcast, can break this silence, which is a huge concern? And what legal rights do women have regarding confidentiality, privacy, and non-discrimination in sexual health treatment?
Right. So India still thinks that talking about sex is not right. It's like it questions morality, right? But sex health is one of the most underrated problems that causes cancer and many other more problems. And about 30 million women face STI, and 70% of them don't even get treated. They don't even go and acknowledge it to the doctors, right?
The data
It
is
shows-
really concerning about it. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's what the problem is, because they're fearing that they'll be judged or they'll be backlashed in their own family, right? And although, as I mentioned before, that we need to spread awareness as they are protected under Article 21. Article 21 protects them from everything. Their personal life is their personal life, and no healthcare practitioner can actually say no based on your marital status or whatever problems you're facing, be it your economic conditions or not, right? No public healthcare places can say no to you, right? We need to let women know that their body comes first as well, and they need to start taking care of it.
That's true. That's true. Now coming to the next aspect of it, as you also mentioned of cancer in between. That brings me to my next question about cervical and breast cancer. So cervical cancer is one of the leading causes of death among Indian women. Yet many have never even heard of Pap smears or HPV vaccines, right? So similarly, breast cancer detection is often delayed because of shame or of lack of knowledge, as we have already discussed. What steps do you think, legally, in education and in society, are needed to make cancer screening a routine part of women's health?
Agree. We need to make cancer screening a routine checkup because it is very important to for women to know what's happening in their own bodies, right? Because India accounts to 1/5 of the world's cancer dying patients. Okay, and about 71% don't even, like women especially, 71% of women especially don't even know what pap smear is, right? And only 90% of cervical cancer can be prevented by that, right? And I feel that so touching breast in India is a weird thing. Like, people are not comfortable with it. It's considered a taboo, and nobody, like especially in rural areas, no women will be mentally open enough to go to the doctor to get it checked, right? That's why we diagnose it so late that it gets very difficult to treatment. Like, the treatment of breast cancer gets too
Delayed.
difficult and delayed, and because of that it's not preventable as well. I'll tell you about India has only one trained female health worker per 1000 women. And because of that crazy number, although when India is the largest doctor producing country in the world, there's such less numbers because of the population as well. It plays an important role. I feel like we have to start educating women. Creating awareness is one thing, but education is very important.
Okay, that is very true. And I mean, speaking of cancer, I mean, cancer is something. Okay, it is still, it is a disease, or for that matter, it's a condition that has that kind of importance revolving around it. But when we talk about other things such as malnutrition and anemia, they do not they do not get the light to abrupt in the society, and they being addressed, right? So India has one of the highest anemia rates among women worldwide, right? Cultural norms often prioritizes men's nutrition over women, and it leads to long-term health issues for them. Despite schemes like Poshan Abhiyan and ICDS, why does anemia remain so widespread? A, and secondly, what changes are needed at family, community, and policy levels to prevent it?
Anemia and malnutrition in women, I feel, is because in rural areas, women are usually, not in rural areas, but women in general are taught to put their family first, and that the male of the family is more important than her own self. That's why I feel that it's an old habit that is happening, that women serve men first and usually end up having the leftover food, like something that does not have enough iron or enough nutrition. And because of that, wi- because of that, symptoms like tiredness, laziness, fatigue arises, and more than often we just ignore it because it's basically the family thinks that it's a reason because she doesn't want to work. Basically she's making excuses, and it's so looked down upon in the family itself that the woman doesn't feel confident enough to reach and actually get proper guidance, right? And like about 59% of adolescent girls share a very large number of low iron intake, right? And because of problems like this, future there can be future diseases proning to them, like type 2 diabetes, cancer, as mentioned before. And I think from the right to education that we have, article 21, we should start teaching young children, young kids, both the genders, male, female, you know that health is important, that, and women especially, that they should take care of their health as well,
That is true. That is true.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I feel.
Yeah. My next question, Kushi, would be something that is, very common these days, and it's a worldwide crisis for that matter. I am hinting towards the problem of PCOS and PCOD. PCOS and PCOD are rising rapidly among young women across the world, not just India. But many still dismiss the symptoms as normal, right? Access to diagnosis and treatment often depends on economic privileges, and other societal judgments and everything. how do we encourage women to take hormonal health seriously? And what role should the healthcare system legally play in supporting them?
That's a great question, Kshitij. I would like to start by saying that PCOS and PCOD is not as, I mean, it's very common as it seems it is, right? And because people generalizes people generalize the symptoms so much. Like, I'll tell you the symptoms. The symptoms are ingrowth hair, and then irregular periods, fat gain, and think about it, that if women are judged so much about just having the normal periods, what about irregular period, what about fat gaining? Because women are judged for everything, for that matter. She's too thin, she's too fat, she's like this, she's like that, right? And because of that, women are already insecure. Now because of this, they feel like it's not right. Right, they know something's wrong with their body, they don't feel well, but they don't have the guts or the confidence to approach somebody to talk about it. For example, in rural areas, be it mother and daughter, like a daughter cannot run to the mother because the mother will just shush her. She'll just be like, it's okay, it's not a big deal, let's not talk about it, because the mother itself is not confident enough, because she's not educated enough to know about the symptoms and the problems, right? And because of this, I feel like, again, Article 21, right to education, because the more awareness we spread, may it in school, colleges, it's very important, so that the youth knows what symptoms this is, and let's overcome all of this together instead of backlashing the women, I feel.
Yeah, that is true. Khushi, I mean, till now we have discussed about all the problems that women face, but they are more of physical in nature,
Yeah.
right? Like something that can be seen through eyes, or that can be diagnosed, or anything. But for that matter, mental health is a huge concern in women these days, right?
Yes.
And it is something, it is an invisible crisis for that matter,
Agreed.
right? So women carry emotional burdens from caregiving, workplace pressure, body image anxiety, marital expectations, and post partum changes, right? Yet mental health is not that openly discussed. And under the Mental Healthcare Act 2017, which is actually an amendment, women have the right to mental health services, confidentiality, and support, right?
Right.
So, why is this gap between the law and reality so wide?
Because I feel that because of the culture we live in, and I'll tell you one thing, which is that the National Mental Health Survey indicates that women face twice the rate of mental problems, and only more than 71% don't even report it. Like twice more problems than men, and they don't even report it. Like, I think that's a big problem, because women are supposed to be the caregiver, right? The caregiver of the house, the house bearer, the person who does all the household chores, the family societal pressure, the family pressure. And because of that, they don't get enough attention, they don't get enough validation, they don't have anybody to support them either, right? Because of that, problems like anxiety disorders, PTSDs have increased in women, because women are emotionally, biologically speaking, women are more emotionally bound, right? And that is a major reason. And although government is taking out schemes and the Confidentiality Act, but we need to bridge the gap again by telling women that it's okay to talk about your problems, right? And if the family members are not listening, you need to take a guide, like you need to, yeah, you need to take guidance from outside. Like, there are, I feel like recently I've got to know that there are helpline numbers you can just call, you can just talk about their problems, they'll connect to you, they'll connect a therapist to you, and then they see, because we live in a generation where technology is so advanced that we can use technology for our benefit. I feel like if we spread awareness about telemedicine, which is a new concept, it will solve many problems.
That is true.
Yeah.
And now I would like to just move towards the qualitative aspect of questions. which is about addressing, social taboos and cultural barriers. We have already done that. I mean, you have actually spoken about them. But, even when laws and schemes exist, social norms such as shame, silence, patriarchal control often stop women from seeking help, right? What are some effective ways communities can break these taboos? This is a question towards the entire community in large, not toward a woman, but to the third party as a community at large, of what changes the community should make to make women feel more safe.
Yeah, I feel the best way of doing so is, I mean, bridging the gap between everything is by spreading education, like by telling our youth that we need to question the practices that used to happen before, right? We need to explain our youth that although what is happening since a long time, it does not need to continue happening. We are mature enough, we are adults now, like the youth studying in college schools, that we need to take decision and we need to make the difference between right and wrong, and not follow what was culturally told that this is right. And we need to start talking about our problems way more openly instead of being embarrassed by it. Like, people do question the self respect and dignity, but people need to know that it's not at the cost of their own health, right? Mental health is equally important as physical health, and we need to take mental health for both genders, for that matter, very seriously.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that is there. Also, you spoke about, I mean, technology and all the technological
Yeah.
advancements. Coming to technology and the future solutions, from telemedicine, which you again mentioned, to menstrual tracking apps
Yeah.
and to AI based diagnostic tools, technology is transforming women's health to a larger extent. How can we use this innovation to bridge the healthcare gaps, especially in rural India? Because again, look, technology is something that is more intrigued in the urban
Urban
areas.
areas,
But
right.
to make this technology go towards the rural area, or to make it accessible towards rural areas, is something. It is a limitation, and how do we overcome it?
So now everybody has a phone. Okay.
Yeah.
I feel that government should take plans or make schemes to provide internet in rural areas, right? Because internet is not that common. There's data, but like not enough. Like, now that we visit rural areas, sometimes we don't have internet there, right? But if we start having internet, we can download these apps. We can download apps for tracking your periods, your cycle, and to know if you have any symptoms of PCOD, PCOS, and for that matter, other telemedicine facilities that are provided, right? If the government just makes that effort, I think the bridge would really work. And I would also like to add that although telemedicine plays an important role, I think people are not aware that it exists altogether, right? Not many people know that there are apps, there are phone numbers you can call, right? We need to advertise it a lot. I feel like that would help a lot.
So it is more of an infrastructural barrier that is
Yes, I
causing
feel
that.
advertisements will play a big role.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So it's again about the awareness perspective. And Khushi, before we end this podcast. Lastly, I would like to, I would just like to know your perspective about, if you had to give one message to our young listeners, to all the viewers of our podcast, students, working women, and men, about their role in improving women's health. What would you say? And legally, what rights must every woman be aware of to safeguard her health and dignity?
Right. So my message to the young people would be that let's talk about our problems more openly. Let's come together. Let's question the practices that has been happening. Let's question the government, because they are publishing schemes, right? But they're not. Maybe where else can we make it better, I would say. And that the rights, I think every woman should know, that is Article 21, the fundamental right. Every woman, every citizen has it, and that she has the right to safe sanitation, right to have a dignified life, confidentiality, mental health care. And there's so much that if women just start prioritizing themselves, for that matter, our youth in general, if we start prioritizing ourselves, we can make this place a better place.
Thank you, Kushi. Thank you for all your inputs. To our viewers, this was actually a very great medium to, I would say, spread the idea of hygiene through the lens of law. And because, it is something that concerns the human resource of the country, and women are 50% of this human resource, I believe it is somewhere down our social responsibility, our legal responsibility, that we spread awareness, we provide them the healthcare they need, because again, biologically and on every aspect, women are and men are different. So treating women with speciality and with concerns is a must for any nation and for its development. And I believe with this, this podcast shall help every other women out there, taking care of their health, and supporting the entire community. So thank you, viewers, for listening to us, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you.